Hi, this is Leora Lanz, and you're listening to Marketing Mindset Lessons from Hospitality, the podcast where I speak with some of my amazing friends throughout the global landscape of hospitality and marketing. We will share best practices that you can use in your business, whether it's in traditional hospitality or not, whether you are an emerging leader in the industry, or seasoned and wanting to stay fresh and always learning. If you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, you need a marketing mindset. Whether you're marketing a business or yourself, we all need a marketing mindset. We know you're busy, but take a listen and figure out how you can apply this fresh thinking to your world, both professional and personal. Let's all think like a marketer.
Hi, everyone, and we are back with another conversation for the Marketing Mindset Podcast. I'm Leora Lanz, author of Developing Your Marketing Mindset, Real-World Lessons from Hospitality, and Marketing Mindset in Motion, Inspired by Hospitality, where I want to inspire us all, thanks to the wonderful world of hotels and restaurants and travel and tourism and destinations, how to think like a marketer. And I'm really thrilled today because we're going to poke some holes in how we do our marketing today with the conversation that we have planned now. In a moment, I'm going to bring in my friend Lizzette Casarin. Let me tell you who she is and why this is going to be a really cool conversation. Lizzette Casarin is the Senior Director of Marketing for HVS, my alma mater, the leading hotel global consultancy. She's Senior Director for HVS in the Americas, where she combines data and storytelling, industry insights to strengthen the firm's brand and thought leadership. She's been with HVS for more than 25 years. She knows that company inside out and the world of hospitality. She's worked across nearly every facet of the business, from research and ops to consulting, portfolio management, and strategic marketing. It gives her a unique perspective on the hospitality industry because she's got multiple perspectives. More recently, she's focused on leveraging AI to enhance productivity while preserving the value of human expertise. Don't you love that? Listen to how that's worded. Leveraging AI to enhance productivity while preserving the value of human knowledge. She posed a question to me, Lizzette. She said, the marketing world is full of conversations about AI, personalization, attribution, data, automation, growth, hacks. We're in a moment where marketers have this unprecedented access to information with sophisticated tools to be able to decipher and analyze that information. But just because we have it, should we use it? We're going to talk today about the ethical use of information. Is it ethical? Is it influence for marketing, promotion? Is it manipulation? Oh my gosh, Lizzette, you asked some really healthy questions. It's my pleasure to bring in Lizzette Casarin for what I think is going to be a very provocative conversation. Hi, Lizzette.
Hi, Leora. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, that introduction is all truth because that's who you are and that's what you do. So thank you for all you do for the industry and for a company that's actually very important to my career too, as you know, because we had a chance to overlap. And for me to watch what you've been doing since the time that I actually left there, it's actually a joy. So I really am excited to have this talk with you, and especially thrilled, as you know, when you posed these questions and said, let's have this conversation, I thought, great. This is taking us in a different direction, a direction that I think is really healthy, really important, and often missed or overlooked or omitted, and we better not. So let's talk about human-centered marketing, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. What would marketing look like if trust was the primary KPI? Good grief. You and I talked about this. Trust. That's how we build relationships, whether it's people, individuals, brand to consumers, B2B, B2C. It's about the trust factor. Does anyone actually measure that? You posed that question to me. Why?
You're absolutely right, and everybody talks about trust and integrity, and they use this vague, grandiose words, but do people truly understand not just the Merriam-Webster definition of things, but what that actually looks like, feels like, even tastes like sometimes? I think we live in a world of quick connection, fast transaction. We see it in every step of the way, just fast fashion, fast trends. Everything is trendy. You have 15 seconds of, fame, and then you're faded away. And to me, and I think you probably can agree with this and everybody viewing this, that rapid fire bombarding creates more a sense of overwhelm than a sense of trust. If anything, the rapid fire and the density of information creates an environment of what can I trust? Because we get so many polarized messages all the time. I think it's harder for people to discern what is trustworthy and what it's not. So those are the kind of thoughts I have when I'm not
Yeah.
working, and sometimes when I'm working, to be quite honest.
When I teach, actually, and I'm teaching digital marketing and approaches for hospitality, which of course can be used in any business, but I always use the expression, how do we cut through the clutter? Because there is so much out there, it can feel like chaos. It is completely overwhelming. How do we cut through that to gain trust? And I think that's what you're asking, actually.
Yes.
Have you thought about that in a deep way? Have you thought about that in a way, whether it's through your work or through other things in your life, about how does a brand, how does a person cut through that noise to gain trust?
I mean, that's a question that I wrestle with every day, to be honest, because there's a fine line of what is emoting people to feel seen and to feel stuck. What's the difference between being pampered and just feeling like this domineering helicoptering kind of thing? And so I'm constantly thinking about that in my work, and obviously I'm a consumer, and when I am on the other side of the equation, when I'm the C to the B, I've had really bad experiences in the sense of, I just had one experience. I order, a pair of sandals from a company using my personal email address. And all of a sudden I got an email on my professional address telling me that I had left things on the cart. And I was like,
Oh,
how did you
cross-pollinate
how-
that information.
exactly? And
Ooh.
for a marketer and for the people behind this company, have you guys thought about when crossing the line makes a
Wow.
customer or a client even feel like a little too much, a little,
Yeah.
you're using a little too much information and now you've crossed the line.
Wow.
And
You know, Go ahead.
yeah,
You mentioned to me, which was very flattering to me, because thank you for reading Marketing Mindset. But there was a few things that you said resonated with you about trust. Could you share with us what resonated with you, and how it's part of this conversation?
yes, absolutely. I think in a world of fast tech, fast everything, 15 seconds of fame, 3 seconds, if not, yeah, 3 seconds
Of attention.
of
Yeah.
attention, which is the crazy part, right? Um, as I was reading your book, you posted a question that kind of encapsulated what I've been feeling a lot. And it's how do we make people feel after the touch point, right? You mentioned in my bio, like one of the questions is, we are in the business of gathering every single piece of data. And I remember back in the early 2000s going to a workshop and learning about the amount of information that a marketer can get just from having an email address
Right.
and how deep that well goes. And we sometimes don't realize that we use that email address to talk to our friends about very important, vulnerable, private, confidential things. Sometimes we're talking about health with our doctors, and whatever that noise is that they are able to pull back, it's put into a psychographic profile of vulnerabilities and opportunities and challenges. They pretty much have a SWOT analysis on us. And And my question is like, just because you have it, should you use it and leverage it in that way? If
Yeah.
you ask your question, the question that you so brilliantly asked, how do we make them feel? If you honestly sit with that and you put yourself in the shoes of a consumer, you're probably going to come back with a more balanced, a more, in integrity, ethical way of segmenting the data that you truly need and
Right.
respecting people's humanity and privacy. And I think right now we're at this tension of that.
We're going to talk about that in a second. One of the things that I realized after, it wasn't until even after I wrote the book and just sort of started to write, if marketing is about connection and hospitality is about connection, your marketing is part of your hospitality and your hospitality is actually part of your marketing. I actually equate them if you
Yeah.
look at it from that perspective. And so that's why our marketing has to be important about how we make people feel, because it is part of our touch points. It's part of our brand. It's part of our hospitality. So here you're giving us an example of how the marketing didn't make you feel good, right? It actually made you feel uncomfortable. And that's not what we want. I'm going to shift gears for a second. We're probably going to come back to this. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of repetition and re-emphasizing these rhetorical questions that are very healthy and very important. When we talked last, you talked about, when did marketing become less about understanding the customer and more about predicting what they're trying to do? The predictive analytics. And we hear brands now, we've got predictive technologies with AI. We can predict what they're, how do you know? And is that what we should be doing? What made you ask that question? And why do you feel that that's also an important question in terms of the ethics or how we make people feel?
Thank you so much for asking that question. And that is kind of like a two-prong. I'm going to give you a two-prong answer.
Okay.
Culturally, I am from a different country. I have indigenous roots. I am mixed raced,
Okay.
but with indigenous roots. And in indigenous culture, we see the vast of Mother Nature, for instance, this unlimited resources of everything. But traditionally, we are taught to only take what we need to preserve the ecosystems, right? So that's already in my DNA. And now I see children, and I talk to children, not mine, but other people's children that I have very close relationships with. And I ask them the question that we all were asked, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Right?
Okay.
And the answer that I always get is a YouTube influencer. And that scares me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because again, it's really giving a lot of time and energy to encouraging this fast, quick, rich, quick fame, quick fashion, quick everything. And so in that regards, that answers one of the questions, right?
Oof. Yeah.
And on the other side, I have the honor and the privilege of being taken care of a teenager girl from my community that needed help. And there are some apps that are sold to parents to monitor their children and keep them safe, right?
Okay.
That's the marketing, the branding, the everything. And so of course parents are going to want to keep their children safe in this day and age. And they consume these apps. And what the app is really about is an AI and an algorithm going through text messages and flagging certain things. But the AIs don't have context. They
Right.
don't have understanding of language. And they are doing what they were programmed to do without any insight.
Without any human context.
Right, through a keyhole of technology only. So what ends up happening is like these apps label things as, as simple as, oh my God, I cut myself while I was shaving, for instance.
And that
And
would
then
be
immediately-
labeled as or triggered as cautionary or warning or something more.
Correct.
So forgive me.
Yeah, go ahead.
This sounds like the difference between AI not necessarily serving the customer, but as you put it, exploiting some of the vulnerabilities. Is that what you're concerned
You're
about
absolutely
there?
right. And then it goes farther than that, right? Because
Oof.
if the person believes that this AI is keeping their child safe, and under that belief, they think, oh, this is helping me parent. That creates a tension in the connection and the relationship with your child. The child no
Yeah.
longer feels like they have any privacy, and therefore that connection and that trust severs. And so that's what started making me think about, are we using AI for our benefit and are we leveraging it in a good way? Because let's be honest, everything has a duality. Everything that has ever been invented, not even if they were invented with good intentions, eventually becomes how can we use this
In
for
some other
in
way.
some other not
Yeah.
ethical,
Not positive way.
not
Right.
positive ways. And I think
Right.
we are confronting that issue with AI right now. What has happened in the news, the fabricated connections or perceptions of reality they're creating with people that are vulnerable in regards to companionship. We see it in the news all the time. We see the ISLOP constantly planting the seed of doubt. So people don't know what to trust. And when you don't know what to trust, you become defensive and you become isolated. And then the divide and conquer kind of strategic
Right.
just takes over.
I'm going to go back.
Mhm.
I'm going to take a step because you brought us down, not down. You brought us through a journey just now of how a technology and a tool, AI driven, that was intended with positive purposes could go down a rabbit hole of all of a sudden causing a mistrust, um, negative connotations. It could really even cause a problem between a parent and their child, right? Their teenager. So I'm going to take it back because one of the things I even talk about in the book is what I'm concerned about greatly, particularly because of this explosion of technology and AI, which is all intended well. And it's the lack of critical thinking by humans. We're taking information at face value without even researching it, without even looking into it, without asking questions. And we're taking it as gospel, and we're not doing our own thinking. And that's where the human side of things needs to be emphasized more. And I would like to think, in the case that you gave as your example, your personal example, you're educated to know how far this has gone and this is not working. And I'm not saying other folks aren't educated. I'm just saying other folks are just believing the AI, where they're almost treating it as a human companion to be able to listen to all this. And so, how do we swing that back to marketing for a moment, Lizzette? In terms of, the AI or the tech, and we're marketing, are we crossing the line? Is it too much information? Are we getting too invasive? When do we stop it? Do you have other examples of what concerns you, what worries you? Um, why do we need to just listen and have some self-awareness?
Absolutely. I think as a marketer, we have a responsibility to not only think about the intention, but also think about the potential impact of the actions. And I know you did public relationship crisis, right?
Yeah,
And that's
crisis
something,
relations.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that is something that you're constantly thinking, anticipating what can go wrong,
right.
and then thinking about how to communicate it in a way, not that we're ever going to be able to prevent somebody taking it in the wrong way, right? But at least minimizing the risk of potentially eating egg in a very public way.
Right. At least, listen, with crisis public relations, you have to be genuine, you have to be real, you have to tell the truth. And yet we're trying, I don't want to say soften the blow in a way that's omitting information or not telling the truth. It's just a matter of how do we keep people calm as we try to handle a crisis situation. That's what we're
Right,
talking about.
right. And to me, that also brings a point to the back. Like, just because we have a public relationship crisis team, does that mean that we're just going to produce things without thinking about it because we have them there as a soft landing page? So to me, for marketers, preventative is better than reactive. And while we cannot imagine every single possible scenario, I think we had a pretty good direction of what is right and what is wrong and what is ethical and unethical, what is a little too much, what is crossing the line. So I think that when we are in that creative process, it's very important to have those open conversations, to have an environment where people can critically think,
Right.
right?
Right.
Without because I think you mentioned something earlier, and let me just get back a little bit to what you mentioned that caught my attention. You talk about credibility for AI, and I think it's a chicken and the egg, but I think they go together in hand. Technology creating back in the early 2000s, late 90s, creating this amount of information that was thrown at you, and
Okay.
then they created the overwhelm, right?
Right.
Then they created the AI. And to me, the way they're marketing it is the AI is going to be able to get through all of the noise that we created. And they're going to pull out the needle in the haystack that you're looking for, and they're going to give it to you, right? I think that's how AI is being marketed.
So you're thinking that AI is marketed as sort of the aggregate of the information. If we're looking for something specific, it's going to aggregate it for us and pull out. And then do we question it or not?
Right. And then not only that, it doesn't stop in there, right? And then they're marketing it as we're going to deliver it to you in the way that resonates the best with you. So if you
Yes.
don't really truly
That's
understand anything, is explain it to me like a kindergartner, right? Or explain it to me from this angle. So it's almost being marketed as a tool that can give you a 360 view of things. And maybe in the future we will get there. But right now, the reality is that people are trusting what the marketer is saying, when in reality, it's creating even more silos and more blind spots and more polarization and more enabling it, depending on how you prompt what you're wanting, right?
right. Right. So we'll take this a step further because you've used these words in our previous conversations. The difference between, and again, from a marketing standpoint, this applies to hospitality and to any industry. The difference between relevant and almost manipulative, right? Because you'd like to think our marketing is influential, we're connecting, it's intended to influence and to educate and to inform. When does it get crossing the line to manipulation?
Yeah, I think it's easier to fall into line blurring when you have technology only. I think it's a little bit harder to fall into that when you have a human in the middle of it, right?
Right.
So, I'm probably gonna age myself. I'm a Gen Xer. Um,
I'm still older, don't worry.
no, it's okay, it's okay.
I'll age
I'm a
myself
Gen
more.
Xer, and I grew up without technology. Um, and then the next generation grew with technology.
Right.
So in that sense, what I want to say is that I feel a sense of trust and a sense of special treatment when I have a human connection with someone. So if the manager of a hotel came to me and talked to me and we started a conversation, and then that conversation created a little spark, and then the next time I come back to a hotel or a restaurant, they greet me by name because there was that initial, spark.
Right.
That to me feels genuine. That to me feels lasting. That to me feels like reciprocity. I'm coming to your environment and you're taking care of me. Therefore, I'm going to take care of you. And then that relationship just grows from there.
And that's the word. It's a relationship. And it feels like a
It's a
healthy
relationship.
connection. It's a
Exactly.
relationship.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if you are farming that connection point to a technology piece, it's going to land with some people because some people just don't like to interact with others. And those people are their niche market. But the rest of the people that are actually craving connection, that are craving that relationship, that is just not going to land the way they are intended.
Right.
And
Right.
that's when the situation breaks.
I would like to hope, regardless of generation we're in, humans are social creatures and we were meant to have social connection. And there's a possibility with all this technology and with younger folks who are more digitally savvy because they're digitally native and they're growing up with these tools that we did not grow up with, that they may not be living in a societal environment that encourages that social connection the way we had it. But I would like to hope that we pass those beliefs and elements of what makes us human for everyone to feel. And I'd like to hope that we have more of that social connection because that is the hospitality and that is marketing. So I'd like to hope that we go in that direction.
I agree with you.
So you ask a lot of good questions. I don't know that we necessarily have answers for all these questions, but these are really good questions for hospitality executives to think about, for marketing professionals to think about. Lizzette, what would you share for anyone who's just watching us and listening to this and sort of if they're seeing us or hearing us right now and they're going, where are you going with this? You know, what do you want me to take away from this? Like where you ask great healthy questions. Now what? What would you want folks to leave with, knowing that you're helping to sort of poke some holes and get us to think like humans?
Right. And I think that's the key piece, right? The humans. I think anyone interested in marketing, anyone interested in nourishing relationships and business development, because as you so smartly said, right? Not everybody thinks as a marketer, but everybody should start thinking as a marketer. Um, because we live in the world of personal branding,
Right.
right? Like
We
what
do.
we do reflects in so many layers of our lives. So what I would say is, as a rule of thumb for me, I always ask the question, would my customer feel surprised, uncomfortable, or deceived if they knew exactly how the data was collected and used?
Huh.
You know? And so if you ask yourself that question and you have hesitation, you have to think about it. If you don't have an enthusiastic no, if they saw what I have about them, they would be perfectly comfortable because I have that existing relationship about them. If it's an enthusiastic no, then do what you're doing. Keep connecting, keep keeping
Right.
humanity in the funnel. Don't farm it out to technology. But if your answer is hesitation or your answer is, oh, yeah, maybe not, you're probably entering unethical territory. And then you need to ask yourself if you're okay with that. To me, it's all about being able to sleep peacefully at night, in my
Yes.
opinion, have a clear conscience. And so that's how I think about marketing when I am creating campaigns, when I am, thinking about what messaging to do, because I don't want people to feel the way I felt with
Right.
this email. I don't want them to have that kind of experience with our company. I want to nourish that personal touch point, that human touch point. And we have so many people in our company that understand that.
Yes.
And they take the extra step to, think about, like, ask your clients about their family, have a little bit more of a personal relationship and create that root that I was talking about earlier, rather than just skimming the surface. So that would
And
be what I would leave people with.
I love that. And that, by the way, does turn into genuine friendships too.
Yes, it does.
Excellent. Any other takeaways, Lizzette, that you're thinking?
I mean, yeah, I think the question that you brought up in the book, how do I make people think or feel about what I'm doing, what I'm delivering, how I'm treating them? That is such an important question. is I think we live, especially, after all of our struggles in COVID and the lack of socialization, I think sometimes we forget about that awareness, that self-awareness of how am I coming across. And that's also very important, especially when you're trying to deliver a message that informs so somebody can make decisions versus push something that I think this people wants or needs based on the vulnerability and the psychographic profile that I've put together for them. So to me, those are two different things. Yeah,
It's about how we make people feel.
absolutely.
Woo! We should go out to lunch now.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for posing these questions. Thank you for making us think. Thank you for keeping marketing ethical and responsible and relationship focused and human centered. I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Lizzette.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure, Leora.
I will talk to you soon for sure.
Look forward to it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Marketing Mindset, Lessons from Hospitality. Marketing Mindset is a production of Think Tank Media and the Hospitality Nexus, the global platform for hospitality education, with resources such as podcasts, articles, and video tutorials. I'm your host, Leora Lanz, and if you want to learn more about how we can work together, visit my LinkedIn at Leora Halpern Lanz. Remember to order a copy of my debut book, the international bestseller, Developing Your Marketing Mindset, Real-World Lessons from Hospitality, which also won the Business Book of 2025 award from the New England Book Festival. And the newest in the series, the companion book, Marketing Mindset in Motion, inspired by hospitality. Everything you need to think like a marketer for your business, your service, or yourself. Connect with meaning through wellness, sustainability, and community to market with meaning and remember the hospitality. Until next time.